All right. You can't unpress the button once it's pressed, right? Yes, there is no unpressing the button. I believe that we are live. All right. Give me just a moment to kind of look at everything and send some links, and then we'll get rocking. All right, I should get some like hold music or something for you guys while we're doing these like obligatory stream setup tasks that I will eventually streamline, but definitely not today. Okay, we are good to go at this point. Let's get rid of that. Actually, let's get rid of that completely. And we'll switch to the other camera here. All right, guys, happy Friday. Before we jump in, let's just take a moment, and this is weird and completely off the cuff, but let's just take a moment to be grateful for the moment that we found ourselves in. Just take like a second to breathe and appreciate that you're alive and we're alive and everything is continuing to move forward, whether we like it or not, and we might as well just move right along with it. So, on that note, let's get cracking. Today is February 4th, 2022. I'm still Zach Elmblad, the owner of Elmblad Media Group, the author of 3 novels, Whatever Happens, Happens, A New Way Home, and Borderline Vagabond. And hopefully, as a result of the end product of this stream, a 4th novel called Normal on Trial. So let's get cracking here. The question today is how do we produce quality self publications in 2022? And I guess just in general, how do we do that, right? As artists, and in our particular medium, authors, how do we take our text that we want to be a book or our idea that we want to be a book and make it from an idea into a thing that you can pick up and read and sell and order online and share with your friends and talk about and be proud of. And so I guess we're going to go on just a little bit of an overview over the course of the next hour or so, and we're going to talk about how I did that and kind of how everything broke down over the past 10 years, and then what I'm going to do to re-engage with it all. And then along the way, hopefully I will be able to teach you something, or at least elucidate this process so that if you choose to take the same route that I took, you will have maybe faster or greater success than I. So in this ideology of sharing information and open sourcing things, let's just talk a little bit about writing books and why you would want to do that. And then what happens when you decide that you don't want to submit your material to a traditional publishing house and you want to take the new media route and become your own publisher and become your own brand, become your own business entity, and kind of take a holistic approach to publishing and working and the creative process itself. So that is the hard way to do everything, and it's not for everybody. And there are a multitude of services that are available, I'm sure, to take care of all or at least most of these processes, including having your writing done for you. But let's assume here that who you are is a person who has a book idea or a manuscript or an artistic work of some kind in progress, or an idea that you've been rattling around in the back of your head, and you want to figure out the steps to begin to make that into a reality, right? So we're going to try to generalize things as much as we can, but of course this is all in the context of and with regards to writing a book. But really a lot of these ideas can be generalized and boiled down to represent just about anything. And so let's talk about the author-editor mindset and the author-publisher mindset. So there's a couple of reasons that one might want to publish their own book. The primary reason for that is there's not a mass audience for your work yet. And that was my reason for choosing this route. Financial consideration, privacy, the type of material, these are also good reasons. But if you were going to decide to create a work of fiction or narrative nonfiction, as was my case in the past, moving on into just kind of American literature, and also kind of genre fiction and or fan fiction stuff where copyright might be getting a little loosey-goosey. There's a whole lot of reasons why you would want to self-publish, but let's assume that you just have an original idea and you want to maintain control over the entire project from start to finish. And you kind of take the approach of, I want to make a sandwich from scratch. How do I do that? And what does scratch mean? And when you're following those directions, how seriously do you want to get about your ingredient sourcing and all of the things that would be involved in making that sandwich, right? Like there's many ways to write a book. You could write a bunch of words on a legal pad and send it to an editor and have them type it up and do all of this kind of stuff for you. Or in the case of Garrett Schelke, an author that I work with in a publishing role and as a designer and typesetter, copy editor, Garrett writes everything longhand and then types it out and sends me the raw text, which I then manipulate into something that's a little bit more visually appealing than just a big chunk of like text from the mind of the author. And we're going to get into that a little bit as well. What an editor really does and what a layout person does and a cover designer and a interior designer, typesetter, all these different roles of the publishing process. If you're going to be doing all of those things, you're going to kind of have to have some sort of understanding about what that role translates to on like an individual level. So that in mind, let's assume that you also have an entrepreneurial spirit, meaning you are a type of person that wants to create a business out of your talent or skill. And not everyone wants to do this. I'm a professional photographer by trade, as my day job, or however you want to put it, the thing that makes me the most amount of money that I use to like buy groceries with and pay my rent. And most people would consider themselves a photographer, most people take pictures of their family, they take pictures of their vacation, they take pictures of their dog or cat, they take pictures of things that they think are cool. And a lot of them are really cool, interesting pictures that tell a story, and in many cases can be printed out and look amazing, but the difference between someone who's a good photographer and a professional photographer is you call a professional photographer and you expect them to show up with exactly what they need. They're going to be able to take any type of picture basically on demand, any type of visual style, any type of subject, whether we're talking weddings or like natural light portraits, like senior picture portraits in a park somewhere, or newborn portraits, or real estate photography, which is what I do, or architectural landscape photography. Like, there's so many ways to communicate visually in still images that can support a career that will exist, if not in perpetuity, at least for another 20-ish years, maybe. I mean, I can't see the two-dimensional still image being outdated visually from a design standpoint for a really long time. Quote me if I'm wrong. I mean, pull this thing up in 20 years and see where we're at. But I feel like photography is going to be a consistent way of visual communication, right? And that's kind of the point that I was making on the last stream about why write a book in 2022 and what is a book, because the idea is the conveyance of your thoughts. It's the book is only the vehicle, and the podcast is only the vehicle, and the photographs are only the vehicle. And it's sort of this entrepreneurial spirit can burrow itself down into your entire existence in this way, where you're not necessarily going to see everything in your life as a revenue stream, but what you will see it as is asset management. Time becomes an asset, your finances become assets, your credit becomes asset, your equipment becomes an asset, your physical person and your ability to sleep and eat and go grocery shopping, those are all assets to be managed, right? And if you have this holistic approach to your creative career, that's going to translate into a business career and a lifestyle for you, this is your podcast video live stream to watch. So let's assume that these things are resonating with you and you have a book idea that you'd like to put out into the world, or a music idea or something like that. The first thing that you need to figure out is, can you sell it? And do you want to sell it? And if you choose to answer yes to both of those questions, then the first thing that you need to establish is, who is your audience? So let's move the camera over here to the computer and let's look at that. So who is your audience? It's a good question. If you are just writing literature and you don't know who your audience is, and this is how I existed in my career for 6 or 7 years, look in a mirror. That's who your audience is. If you're writing to yourself and you're communicating your ideas, your audience is probably going to be people like you. So who's your audience? People like you. People with your thoughts. Okay. And if it's going to be people like you, that's going to beg the question, who am I? Well, my name is Zach. I'm Zach. I'm 37 years old in a couple weeks. I was born in the United States of America. I live in the state of Michigan. I graduated from college. That makes me a college graduate. I have been a restaurant employee I have been a strip club DJ. I have been an author. I have been a brother and a son and a boyfriend. I have been all sorts of things. And that means that my life stories can translate into others' life stories. We're all connected. And so that means my audience are people like me. And who's that? We're going to be talking people probably over 18, probably under 50, maybe even under 40. I'm not that far under 40 anymore, but when I was writing these first books, I certainly was under 40. I was under 30. I was in my early 20s. So we're going to say my demographic is 18 to 35, okay? And then 18 to 35, educated, working class, all right? Just like me. And then connected, in the internet world and social media, we know how to use the digital resources that we have, okay? So how do I convey the message to this audience, right? What do people our age use to interface with the world now that we can't just walk down the street and meet each other anymore because of reasons, whatever they may be? The answer to that question is definitely digital engagement in the social sphere as your avatar, like putting yourself out into the world. And so let's put the camera back on and we'll talk for a second here. If we're going to establish our audience, we can be broad, you know. We don't know who we're speaking to entirely. We have a pretty good idea, but we don't always know. Sometimes there is a grandma somewhere in Omaha that just likes your smile and she thinks your content is great and she's just there to support you. She's not like you, but maybe she identifies with you in some way. These are outliers. You can't start imagining who's engaging with your content as an outlier until you start having them, right? So you'll get weird stuff. You know, we're globally connected. So, you know, back when Kenny and I were doing the New Scum Fix, the podcast that I did for a while, you know, we had regular listeners in Bangladesh and India and all over Europe, and they would email me and just say, hey, Zach, you know, listen to the last episode. We thought it was funny when you puked in the garbage can. Like, you know, the dumb stuff that I was doing and Kenny and I were doing. The point is, I would have expected that who was listening to that podcast was our buddies, you know, maybe my mom, you know, grandma. But in reality, you know, you're putting yourself out on a global stage and anyone could be listening to you. So it becomes daunting to choose who it is that you're talking to when you don't really know yet. And so that's why I think the safe bet is always going to be, who is your audience? People like you. Who needs the message? People who are maybe stuck in a way that you've been stuck before, or people that need to read your content or hear what you have to say. And you can determine who needs to hear what you have to say by thinking about what it is that you're saying while you're writing, right? And so, you know, I'm talking to, in Normal on Trial, I'm talking to people who've been on the Appalachian Trail or want to be on the Appalachian Trail. I'm talking to long distance hikers. I'm talking to anyone who's ever broken up with a partner before. I'm talking to anyone who's ever felt like their job sucked. And I mean, these are pretty relatable and identifiable aspects of the human condition and the human experience. So it's really likely that just about anyone is going to be able to garner some sort of value out of content like this, like ours, like mine, like yours. And it may be more people than you think. So narrow down your audience and speak to them, but don't be surprised when your audience is not who you expected it was, and then make sure you tailor your approach after you figure out who your audience is. And then if you're going to market this thing and all of that, I will admit that my experiences in marketing are very little outside the real world. So we're in my studio, and in the before times, this place was open to the public on the first Friday of every month, which traditionally would have been today, Friday, February 4th, the first Friday in February. And so this is sort of my chance to speak publicly to people in the same way that I would have when they were allowed to just walk in my door every first Friday between 5 and 9. And so since that's not the case anymore, this is kind of the public forum. I can point people toward this. If they have questions for me about how I did things, here we are. So let's see, we're already 25 minutes into this stream, and I've been waxing poetic about why we would want to do this. Let's talk about how I did it and like how mechanically that worked. So if you are looking to publish your work on Amazon, either as a Kindle product or as an actual printed physical copy of a book that you're going to sell in a shelf as well, like distributed to bookstores, there are a number of ways to do that. Here's my listings on Amazon. You'll see here I have this photo book, Kalamazoo Graffiti, that is still available on my website, I believe. But I used a different supplier when I was creating this book, so this one's not available currently. This is one of the things that's broken down that I need to address soon, but we'll get to that in good time. So I used Blurb to make this book, but the other ones were all created on a platform called Lulu. So this is my back end on my projects tab on Lulu, and you can see here are Whatever Happens, Happens, A New Way Home, and Borderline Vagabond, and in their various incarnations, be they hardcover, paperback, or ebook. And then here, ACX is the platform through which I was able to publish my only audiobook, Whatever Happens, Happens. And that was done in 2012 here, submitted 21 August 2012, so just about 10 years ago. And you can see, down here, I mean, I have definitely sold some of these, but I'm not a famous author by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just hoping that we can maybe add a 0 to the end of this or whatever by the end of this thing. We'll see. It's not about selling my books. It's about helping you figure out how you're going to sell yours. And then speaking of Garrett, here's a little bump for him. I'm also really proud of the work that we did with Garrett. In terms of my contribution to these things, Elmblad Media Group did publish Up Jamboree here, but we've also done some design work on the entire Godin series. As we're scrolling through here, you can see all of this stuff. And this is kind of going to bring us into some points about design in your publications. And visual identity is one of the most important things with your branding and your graphic design. And so I have been intimately involved with Garrett Schelke's career here. His pictures, I've done his pictures. I helped the cover design for Anamaki, the 5th anniversary edition. All of this stuff we've kind of finalized and put out in this room here. So while I have my books, which I'm proud of, I'm also really proud of the work that I've done with Garrett. And, he and I have had many, many conversations on his podcast, the Garrett Schelke podcast, about writing and the writing process. But we don't really get into the mechanics of how I'm actually taking the stuff that he's sending me and turning it into a book. So if we're going to talk about that a little bit, let's just go ahead and crack open one of my books and we'll talk about design. So this is Borderline Vagabond. We read from this a little bit last week, but I'll just go ahead and take a sip of water here. And I'll read kind of the intro text. So my design philosophy in terms of the interior of my books, I want them to be very approachable. I want them to look beautiful as you flip through them. So me as like a lifelong reader and a collector of physical objects and books specifically, one of my favorite things to do when I'm interacting with a book that I've never seen before is to kind of, handle it. I don't want to read the last page or anything like that, but I want to look at it. I want to flip it back and forth in my hand. I want to run the pages across my thumb and start, having my tactile experience with this author's work. And due to that sort of tactile approach to my visual design language, I like to use larger fonts. I like to use bold and italic styles. I like to have kind of small illustrations. One of the things that really impacted me about Kurt Vonnegut's work was that he would have those little Sharpie drawings. And I always thought that was really funny. And so I figured that I would incorporate stuff like that in my text as well. So we have my logo design here. We'll talk about that in a second. Table of contents type stuff. I'm trying to get to something specific here. Yeah, here's this spiral that I made 10 years ago. And this is what I'm talking about. This isn't hard to do. It's very simple graphic design. Get a fun font and make a easy drawing in vector and then kind of put it on there. So what we're looking for is a visual identity. What we're not looking for is super complex or, childish or extra. We just want something that's going to set our work apart from everybody else's work. And so this is kind of the visual language that I was speaking when I wrote the book. The choice to put brackets on the page count. Like, why did he do that? The answer is because I like the way it looks, And then I made this weird little thing. I was experimenting with the GNU image manipulation program, GIMP. I made all of these things kind of before I went back to school and learned how to do graphic design correctly. And I always thought this looked fun. One of my favorite lines in the book was what we read last week about the sun hung like an ornament. And, I wanted to kind of put the sun here and then have the chapters in the sun and make it loosey-goosey, kind of like a late 90s children's advertisement for like, I don't know, orange cream soda popsicles or something. I guess that was my design aesthetic, but in black and white because I really like black and white. So I digress a little bit. I'm just talking about, I made a lot of these choices very specifically and consciously, and that came about as sort of experiencing a lot of books and knowing what I liked and what I didn't like and what made things easy to read or difficult to read. So let's take a look at Borderline Vagabond. An intentionally arranged series of words constructing an allegorical narrative about the American dream and other such abstractions of modern civilization by Zachary Kyle Elmblad. That's me. So this is another fun thing that I like to put in all of my books. You know, we don't have to put stuff like this in here, but I just think it's fun. I like there to be some personality in my material. So you may be familiar with this poem here. Let's just read it for the sake of setting the tone. We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and sitting by desolate streams, world losers and world forsakers, on whom the pale moon gleams. Yet we are the movers and shakers of the world forever, it seems. Arthur O'Shaughnessy. So this is part of my dedication page, and this is my follow-up to that stanza. This book is written for the dreamers, for those who can't give up, those who keep fighting, the movers and shakers, those road-worn saints, the rising sun in the east, the setting sun in the west, and for those in perpetual waiting, longing for just one more ride. So this is my separations here, part 1, 2, and 3, the hook, the line, the sinker. Another one of those sort of design choices. You know, I wanted to use this idiomatic expression, and I think if you read the book, you'll understand why I wanted to use that idiomatic expression. So I also made the choice to use single word chapter titles here, and they're all pretty descriptive of what's happening in those chapters. Friends, our mid-20s were wrought with emotional upheavals, grave senses of inadequacy, delusions of immortality, boundless hope for a better tomorrow, and an insatiable lust for adventure. For those few short years of our lives, we found ourselves running madly in search of something we couldn't ever have hoped to find. We wanted a personalized, single-serving portion of the world that was tailor-made just for us. We were children in the eyes of the universe, unabashedly idealistic in our pursuits of happiness and brazenly defiant of the people who expressed any doubt in us. Privileged halcyon days that were spent crisscrossing the continent in a vain quest for the physical embodiment of an ages-old metaphor. We may have never found the American dream as anyone would have seen it, but we did find a world around us that suited our tastes and purpose just fine. All in all, it's easy to say you know what the dream is. It's easy to say you've found it, and it's even easier to say you haven't. For us, the most fun had always been found in the pursuit of things anyhow. It always made for a better story. So this is part 1, the hook. We're going to read a few pages of chapter 1, Consternation. You'll never be loved. This is going to get dangerous, guys. We're getting demonetized for sure. Okay. You'll never be loved. Those were the first words I managed to hear out of what was becoming a long line of obscene and incessant curses that I could have sworn were being directed at me. But from whom? For what reason? Pigfucker. I couldn't quite tell if it was a dream or if it was really happening. Bastard. Prick. Cocksucker. Wake up. I heard it again. But where was I? Who was yelling? How did I get here? When? I got punched in the shoulder. Not hard, but with enough force to wake me up for real this time. With certainty, this was indeed the waking world. I shook my head and opened my eyes. The room was unfamiliar at first glance, but I was pretty sure that I recognized the voice. It's 9 p.m. We should have punched 6 whores in the mouth and drunk a gallon of gin by now. Why are you still sleeping? I was hearing him shout now, jumping up and down on the floor next to the couch. He was red-faced and pointing at me with a violently extended index finger. What day is it? I moaned. I stuttered when I said day. I do that sometimes. I was still waking up. How long had I slept? When did I get here? Where was here? Why was I here? For what purpose? Tuesday, Friday, Easter, who cares? Let's get drunk and walk out on our tab. We've got shit to do and chicks to screw. So that's borderline Vagabond. This is a conversation with the other main character, Hooper Felonius, who is obviously a pseudonym. You know, the person who I wrote the book about asked me to call him Hooper Felonius in the book because he didn't want his actual name associated with any of this stuff, obviously. So as I'm reading there, you can see that I use a lot of bold text. I make paragraph indentations when I'm putting narration in, but when I have a line of dialogue, it's bolded and given an additional line of spacing as well as no paragraph indentation. And so kind of when I chose to use that visual style, it was a deliberate choice, certainly because it's consistent throughout the entire text. But the reason that I chose to do it that way is that I realized after I wrote this book that it was very dialogue heavy. And that dialogue was usually only between two people, and it was taking place as a tit-for-tat conversation of part A and part B. So I didn't really need to put, I found myself erasing a lot of Hooper replied and the Vagabond said, or I said, and it just seemed excessive. So I remember attempting to read Ulysses by James Joyce, and I believe that the quotations, instead of having quotation marks, they just have a dash in front of them or something. And I just remember that being it blew my mind as a teenager looking at that, like, wow, how is it that I know that that's a quotation, but it's not quotation marks? And it was sort of utilizing abstract punctuation rules and style rules that sort of were for Elmblad Media Group or the New Scum Productions, rather than, the Chicago rules or the APA or whatever the university that you might have attended would have required for your papers, right? Like, there aren't really any rules in literature. You could just write a bunch of random words on the page and sell it. And I mean, if you market it right, you might even move some copies of it. Like, the point is that you're expressing a thought, right? And so there aren't really rules. And as long as people are understanding what you're saying, you can feel free to sort of play with it, or play with the construct a little bit, or poke fun at it, or exist within the framework of it, but just show that framework to its own components. You feel me? Let's look back at this outline here. So we've covered holistic design. We've covered producing audio content a little bit. Let's jump back over to the computer here. I'll make a few adjustments, and we'll go back into that ACX platform. So going back here to the ACX stuff, you will see, if we go into projects somewhere, it's been a while, folks. We got projects. I've got completed projects. That's how we found Whatever Happens, Happens. But you'll also see that I have in production titles. So I have Borderline Vagabond and A New Way Home. A New Way Home never got recorded. I never even attempted to read that thing. We talked in the last stream about how I'm not really that proud of it, and I would really like to re-examine the text, but we're going to leave that item for later. What I want to talk about is Borderline Vagabond, the audiobook version. And so I did actually record an entire fully produced audio version of Borderline Vagabond. And people who've been paying really close attention to me and all of my work for the last more than 5 years would know that I completed that project roughly somewhere in 2017. It's on YouTube. You can go find it, I'm sure. Just type in Zach Elmblad and Borderline Vagabond. You'll definitely find it. But there was a lot of rookie mistakes in that. It was kind of rushed, and I recorded it in my bedroom at my parents' house in like 2016 with sort of outdated, crappy equipment, and it just wasn't very good quality. And I thought I would be able to kind of use software to make it okay quality, but it just never really worked, and they called me out on it. I submitted a mix and it got rejected, and then I remixed it again and they still rejected it. And the guy said, you might want to just think about completely re-recording this. I don't know if you're going to be able to salvage this into a saleable product. And I'll tell you, that really discouraged me, but it was the truth. And instead of driving me to challenge myself and just redo the thing, it just kind of made me quit. I quit writing. I quit pursuing selling these books. I quit advertising them. I stopped being proud of them. Kind of all because ACX rejected my audio. So kind of undoing that injustice to myself and my own work is going to be one of my tasks over the coming months, and that's going to involve recording a new audio version of Borderline Vagabond. And you'll notice that I have an elaborate audio setup right here. There's microphones and guitar amps and stuff, like just off camera. Over here is an electronic drum set. I've been a musician and producer for almost 30 years now. I started recording in 1999, in the last millennia. So my skills date back pretty far. They cover a lot of advancement in technology, and I have been ahead of the curve these days with my audio production. And Elmblad Media Group does a lot of live sound engineering and pickup recording and sound design for a number of different types of projects. And so using all of that experience, I hope to deliver a really excellent product for Borderline Vagabond, one that I can be proud of moving on into the future. So let's check our time here. I got about 15 minutes left on the hour that I had planned, and that's kind of a perfect time to break into Normal on Trial. So I'm actually going to close my notes here for a second. By close, I mean just set off view. And let's switch over to the other computer and we'll see what's what. So we're going to jump over to the Mac here, talking about that visual identity and interior design and layout. I just kind of want to show you how early on in the creation process I actually start incorporating these design ideas. So in Normal on Trial, I want all of the subsections and the chapters and their titles to all be in the bottom right hand corner in a very small font. So you'll see that I do maintain a couple of the same things that I had in Borderline Vagabond and my previous ones. Here's another, this is my dedication page for Normal on Trial, and I've actually made the text into the shape of a keyhole, which is, going to make sense as we develop this story. And then Old Night Hiker is a character that we'll run into, and his quote that we're going to really, really, really make into hopefully one of the thesis arguments for this book is the streams become the rivers that feed the oceans. And so this is a little bit on my construction method for my table of contents. And of course, most of this text isn't even written yet. I just have a very clear idea of how I want all of this to be organized. We read some of this preamble last week, so let's go ahead and go down to right here. So the end of my preamble is going to be a bunch of questions. This stuff is probably going to change. That's why I didn't read it. last time. But let's just read maybe the first 3 or 4 pages of what I have here on Normal on Trial. So this is brand new stuff here. Stage 1, Larval, Chapter 1 of 20, July 2013, Common Era, a standard issue Tuesday morning. I gotta get out of here for a minute, babe. I need some fresh air, said Jeremiah Livingston as he walked down the hallway toward the living room. He grabbed his backpack from the couch as he passed. He felt exasperated at the thought of having to rationally explain his own thoughts at a moment of heightened emotion, and enraged at what he now was interpreting as an attempt by someone to stifle his freedom to come and go from his own apartment as he pleased. "Where are you skulking off to now?" Priscilla's voice called from behind him. Her sarcasm was thicker than the pancake batter she was stirring as she stood in the kitchen, and her voice echoed down the hall with this kind of pleasant reverb that Jeremiah wished he could hear applied to her singing voice instead of her yelling voice. "I thought I might take a walk, maybe. Have a breath. Get a cup of coffee, I guess," he said, with a forced calm that she always knew was his way of choking back a temper that she found as reprehensible and repulsive as his inability to tactfully control it or acknowledge it sometime before later came. He was fumbling through his backpack's numerous pockets for a lighter. Jeremiah's primary goal at the moment was to light the cigarette that hung from the corner of his mouth. As always, he struggled with the right words to say in these types of situations, settling with an, "I'm just not sure what the problem is." He reached for the doorknob as she set the bowl of pancake batter down on the countertop with an aggressive smack that likely would have shattered the bowl if it weren't made of the thickest plastic of any bowl they were able to find at Walmart a few months ago after the last post-slam pancake batter fiasco was cleaned up and apologized for. "The problem is that you're always lost inside your head, Jeremiah, always taking off for hours at a time and never paying any attention to me." Priscilla Rose screamed at him from the kitchen and down the hallway as she angrily slammed cupboards and drawers open and shut in an exceedingly frantic search for the yellow spatula that she preferred over the rest of the spatulas in the drawer. "Besides," she added, "we've got plenty of coffee here. You work at a coffee shop. You've been drinking coffee all day. Why don't you just sit down for a while? You're always moving, always doing something. I'm so sick of you bouncing off the walls all the time. Why can't you just sit on the couch and watch TV like a normal person? You said you would hang out after dinner, but I'm not hungry. Are you hungry? I was going to make these pancakes, but now I think I might want to..." Priscilla's words became a droning ensemble in the echo chamber of Jeremiah's mind as he stopped with his hand on the doorknob, thinking about what would happen if he were to turn around and march back down the hallway to hear the rest of whatever it was that Pris had to say. It wasn't that he didn't care that she was upset with him, but that he found arguments such as this one to be tedious and entirely futile. He would rather give in to her demands than put up a fight. They would yell at one another for a few minutes, make up, and apologize. Maybe the yelling would last a bit longer, but the eventual amicable compromise was, at least in his mind, inevitable. Why endure the displeasure of this emotional exchange when things would surely end up resolved in the end? Couldn't they just skip the fighting and go straight to the resolution? His pacifism was more of a curse than a virtue at this point. He wanted peaceful compromise, and he knew it would not come were he to jump on the immediate defensive. Small disruptions seemed laughably insignificant to the Jeremiah Livingston of today, who devoted most of his brain time to the concepts and struggles of nature and the world around him, not the trivialities of their daily living. Life was not a video that Jeremiah could scroll through as he pleased. He had to live it in real time, and this made careful decision-making in the heat of the moment next to impossible for him. Okay, so that's a brick of text, bro. It's a brick. It's a brick. I even struggled to read these 3 pages to myself, and you know, I wrote this stuff 7 or 8 years ago, and I've read it 1,000 times. And I think that's the first time I've actually read it out loud. And you can tell how sort of frantic and spur of the moment this is supposed to make you feel. You're supposed to be there at the door with this guy, just like wondering what the fight is between these two people. You're supposed to see him with his hand on the doorknob, turning around to look, right, as he hears this disembodied voice coming from down the hallway, like, "What are you doing, Jeremiah? You leaving again?" Like we've all like, whether you're the person in the kitchen yelling or you're the person at the door leaving, like we've all been in situations like that. And this is what I mean about captivating text, right? You don't have to deliver your message immediately. And we're opening in Medias Res here, just like I open all my books, like smack dab in the middle of the narrative, and we'll go back and we'll go forward, but most of the time we're just going to progress through the entire story as it happens, right? Flashbacks will have their purposes, and then plot exposition will happen probably at the beginning and end of chapters, and interspersed between sections of like descriptive prose and dialogue and interactions between the numerous characters. So whereas Borderline Vagabond was really just two characters interacting with the world around them and then discussing what they thought about it, even when it wasn't the Vagabond and Hooper Felonious, it was always the Vagabond and someone, right? The Vagabond and Jazz, or the Vagabond and the trucker. Like it was only ever a dialectic that was happening. It was never this sort of open-ended conversation thing, except for the pancake house scene. And so when we're looking at the dialogue in Normal on Trial, you can see that I have chosen to not do the bold stuff and to not do paragraph indentations, and instead I'm just going for the massive chunk of text here, guys. Like Times New Roman all the way, a little bit of serif action. Like I'm trying to make it so that when you thumb through this book, you realize that there's a lot of words going on. So, just kind of looking at my notes here, you can see how I'm kind of working through all of these chapter ideas, and I'll make myself little notes here in italics and just ideas about what I want to do with these chapters. And, some of them I haven't even started at all. I just know what I want to happen in these chapters. Like I haven't written a single word for them. So I guess we won't get too far down in there. But you get the idea. This book being a work in progress, it's only 159 pages right now, and most of those pages are just open space. But my job as an author is to figure out how to fill in those open spaces. And so if the question is, how do you take your idea and turn it into a reality, there's a couple of things that we can cover. And so I did make up a couple diagrams in my notes here. Let me get back to all of this. So this is convoluted, and it's done with a highlighter and a pen, obviously. But let's talk about time management. And these are my final thoughts for the day here. On the topic of time management, have you ever asked yourself the question, how many hours are there in a week? And if you haven't asked yourself that question, allow me to elucidate. There are 7 days in a week, and there are 24 hours in a day. That makes 168 hours. If you work a job in the United States, you probably work about 50 hours a week. That leaves you with 118 hours. If you are going to sleep 6 hours a night, like me, you're going to sleep 42 hours a week. And then let's say you eat for 2 hours a day. That's 14 hours of eating. That might include cooking. That might include ordering your McDonald's, any of that. And then let's say you spend an hour commuting every day. So we're going to take 14 hours of driving time out of your daily trip. And that's not just your commute to work. That's also your commute to the grocery store, to go visit your friends, to go to school or class or whatever. Let's just assume you're driving about 2 hours every day. Obviously we could say that's walking or metro transit time, all of that. The point is, I'm saying you have sort of fixed costs in your time budget every week. So we're already narrowing down pretty low. Okay. We've got about 40, 48, maybe 42 hours left to play with. Now we can go back to our diagram. Now, so if it's not half, but it's close enough for the purpose of making this really chintzy diagram. If a quarter of your time is working and a quarter of your time is sleeping, that means half of your time is just sucked up. There's nothing you can do about that. So let's assume then that you've got, 60 hours to play with, just for the sake of making this easy math. I have it separated here into time for body, mind, and spirit. And I've got those broken down into subcategories here. We got the gym, like taking care of your actual physical body, food, like feeding yourself, eating, shopping, that's for clothing, going to the store for groceries, going to the restaurant, whatever. Your mind, we have having some fun, spending some time to learn, and then an activity for self-enrichment. And then over here on the spirit side, we have time for family, time for faith or meditation. And religion is sort of irrelevant here. It's just introspective time in general, whether that's in prayer or silent contemplation or playing some video games, just some way to engage with the world around you, right? And then my last little section here is contemplation. So in terms of our writing careers, this is kind of where we're going to be living for all of the time that we do everything else. These two categories are the ones that are going to involve our writing process, right? Activity for self and activity time for contemplation. So this is where all of our time is going to live for these couple of things. So let's say you can dedicate 1 hour a day to writing. That's 6% of your week. That's 6% of your year, 6% of your month. You won't get that time back. Your decision to be made is your giving up of an hour a day of your time, is that worth it to you to express your ideas out into the world? And if your answer to that question is yes, then let's look at how you would spend, say, 10 hours a week. That would be 1 hour a day, and an additional 3-hour session on the weekends, or it could be 2 hours a day during the business week. If you're going to spend 10 hours a week doing anything, practicing a musical instrument, learning woodworking, any of that stuff, it's kind of minimal, honestly. You should be spending a little bit more time on your craft, but that's still 520 hours a year, and that is a sizable chunk of time. If you think about that number, 520 hours a year, is that roughly 6% of your time? We don't need to bust out the calculator for all this. You understand that the percentages that I'm saying are pretty minuscule, but everything nickel and dimes you to death. So out of those 10 hours a week, we're going to get basically the same pie chart, okay? And I'll show you what I mean. On this new pie chart, this is the writing process, okay? The writing process is not going to be writing 100% of the time. A quarter of the time, it's going to be notes, just like a quarter of the time of your week is work. And then a quarter of your time writing is going to be daydreaming, just staring at the blinking cursor and looking up dictionary words and just thinking about what you're going to write, making an outline, making idea diagrams, those types of things. And then the other half of your time is going to be split again into a bunch of small little pie pieces. You got editing from a 10,000 foot view. That's when we're scrolling through it really fast and making sure everything looks right. And then we have outlining and concept mapping, and then actual error correction here. And then when we're talking about designing, we need new design work. We need to refine the work that we've done, and then we need to polish the refined work, okay? And you're going to notice that there's a little section here. And then up here we've got reading new books, like reading other authors' material, and then rethinking what you are editing, like rethinking the work as you read it, rethinking your own ideas as you're continuing through the writing process, and then actual word count. So we have this intersection here of polished text and word count on the design and read. And you'll notice that of our time spent designing and reading, none of that is actually writing per se. It's the writing process. Like our notes and our daydreaming and our editing are really our writing process, but the actual function of typing the words onto our word processor is really only like right here, this section of just like the laborious task of pressing the buttons on the keyboard and actually like making the physical words, like making the book, making the text, the product that you're trying to sell and encapsulate in the vehicle known as a book, or in the spoken word format of a podcast or audiobook. And so those being my final thoughts today, you can do it, man. You can do it. We're empowered in this future world to make art, to express ourselves to a global platform very easily, to express our ideas in a professional way. And we can achieve all of those things through third-party services, through paying attention, through the entrepreneurial spirit, through working with each other and finding out who in our community can help us with the various tasks involved in making our art, and then in actually making that art. So in short, the answer, if the question is how do we create quality self-produced content, the answer would be threefold. We need to view quality content to decide what is quality content. So we need to be watching other people's things. We need to be continually making our things. And then we need to be refining our ideas. We need to go back and look at what we made, and we need to think about what has changed about our processes, what has changed about who we are as people, and what has changed about our view of the world. And then we can fold that into our new material. So as I go back through and think about all the things that I dislike about my old work, these are things that are running through my mind about what I can change about my new work. Rather than beating myself up about what I did wrong or what I could have done better, I'm just thinking, man, I'm just going to knock the next one right on out of the park. So I have a completion mindset. I want to get the things done. And if there's a wrinkle or an error or a couple of missed steps along the way, traditionally, I don't really care. A blemished work is a completed work. Nothing is ever going to be perfect because you're eventually sharpening things down to a point that's either going to break or just get infinitesimally smaller as you continue to take smaller and smaller slices off of it. So eventually you have to come up with a point where the damn thing's done, right? You just say, I'm done with you. I'm done with this book. It's ready to go. It's ready to, and you upload that thing and you press send, man. You take the 2 copies and you send it to the Library of Congress and you get your copyright, and there you go. Bam, published author. It really is that simple. You write the book, you do the work involved with editing it and getting it into a presentable form, and then you put that presentable form on a platform, and from that platform it becomes reality. So the steps from going from concept of book to published book are effectively really simple. The really big wrinkle there is, how do you write the thing? How do you make it go from your brain into a series of written words? And I think that's what we're going to cover next week. So probably Thursday or Friday next week, we are going to be talking about the writing process for Normal on Trial, what it is that I'm doing to kind of move the process along, where I ran into some hurdles as I was beginning, and what I did to try to overcome those hurdles as I got to them. So hopefully in the next week or so, I will have written some more pages and I will have some more notes to go over with you. And until then, do enjoy this crazy, beautiful, confusing world that we live in, and do your best to create the art that you were put on this planet to make. Peace.